Okay, how to LS swap a 67 Skylark. You're gonna start out by removing your engine and transmission. I'm not gonna tell you how to do that. Just don't hack up the wiring. Okay, so once your engine and transmission are removed, we can go to our engine prep for our new engine and transmission that are going in, and I'll cover what to do with your old engine and transmission in another video. For our engine, we have an LM4, which is a Gen 3 aluminum 5.3 liter engine. This has the stock 862 heads, has a sloppy stage 2 cam springs, hardened push rods, LS1 rockers with trunnion upgrade, 102 millimeter intake manifold, which these aren't really good for power, but they do look really nice. Long tube headers and a 3022 oil pan with a Melling high pressure stock volume oil pump. The 3022 will hopefully give me the steering clearance that I need. When I tried this previously, I had a 3021 and it did not. I could turn my wheel about 1/8 of the way before it hit the oil pan. On the ground behind me is the transmission I'm going to be using. This is a rear-wheel drive Turbo 400. To use it, I have a 4L80 flex plate with the spacer. For motor mounts, I will be using small block Chevy adapter plates that go onto the mounts that were on the 383, and we'll just bolt back up to this. For fuel, I already have a fuel cell and 6AN nylon braided lines in the car. I will just be adding an inline fuel pump and a C5 filter regulator. So I'm gonna get to work swapping transmissions out and getting this ready to go into the car so that the next video can be everything going into the car, and then hopefully. So yesterday when I ended the video, I was getting ready to put the transmission on and start putting it into the car. Well, I went ahead and did that. So everything is in now. The engine's in, the engine's mounted, the exhaust ends, transmission's mounted. I'm starting on the wiring and my cooling, but yeah, looks pretty fucking cool. Honestly, the downside is that the car is so fucking dirty that you wouldn't expect to pop the hood and have something that clean. So now I'm getting ready to start the wiring portion of this, and I'm trying to decide if I want to use the Phytech Ultimate LS setup or if I want to use one of my own standalones for it. The trade-offs are that they are both equally easy to install, but the Phytech has the self-tuning stuff in it, and this already has like the Phytech 36-pound injectors, etc. So it should be easy with that, and the downside is that a lot of people hate Phytech because it is very problematic. The bright side of mine is that I can tune it with HP tuners. The downside is that they're bland. I guess another bright side of using mine would be if I wanted a display, I can get a CTS3 and then I can have all my gauges and stuff through that, but I don't know yet. The major concern with doing this though, the issue that I ran into before, was my steering clearance to the oil pan. So this wheel is turned as far as it can right now, which I don't know how well you can tell, but it's turned decently, and that is as far as it can go before it makes contact to the oil pan. I think that's doable, and I'm going to run with it. So I still have to put the gaskets in for the headers, but I just wanted to make sure that they fit before I went further with it. They did have to be put in from the bottom, which was kind of a pain in the ass, but not horrible. These are eBay Chevelle GTO LS swap headers. Today with the Skylark, we have a case of the medium sad, and by medium sad, I mean I wanted to do a startup today. I finished all of the wiring for the car. The fuel setup is done. Starters in, everything is there and hooked up. The power is done how it's supposed to be. All of my grounds are good, and the Phytech does not power up. It has power going into it, but nothing coming out and going anywhere. So that kind of sucks. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull the $1,000 plus Phytech Ultimate LS bullshit off and replace it with a $100 Amazon harness that will probably work better. And that is my medium sad. So with your $100 Amazon harness, you got the harness, you got some shitty instructions, and you got some injector adapters that go from EV1 to Multec. So this harness specifically is for, an LS1 4L60 combination. In the past, people have been worried that they got the wrong harness because this has a 4L60 plug on it, and they're running something like I am with a Turbo 400. So just because your harness has a 4L60 or 4L80 plug on it doesn't mean it's the wrong harness. You can ignore the 4L60 plug, you can tuck it up out of the way, you can cut it off, and you can tape up the wires. There's one in it that has power, and the rest of it is in the tune for your computer. You change it from 4L60 or 4L80 to non-electronic automatic, and it will still work perfectly for this. Also, with the cheap harnesses, you need to make sure that you have the correct injector adapters. If you're running something like Multec injectors, they usually come with EV1, which is an LS1 style injector. There's also EV6 on some trucks, and there's adapters for all of them. The other thing is make sure that you have the correct O2 sensors for these. Sometimes they don't read, sometimes they have an issue reading, and sometimes they're just wired for the wrong O2 sensors, but just make sure you got everything and you have some basic electrical skills to be able to address what changes might be needed. All right, so the Phytech is out. It is going to go onto a table so that it can be bench tested and I can try to diagnose what's wrong with it. I could do that in the car, but the amount of time it would probably take is more than it would take to just throw that in and call it good. So I got the cheapo harness pulled into the bay and I'm about out of light, so I'll just finish that in the morning as long as it's not raining. Working on my LS Swap 67 Skylark a bit today. So yesterday I pulled the Phytech setup out and I put a simple standalone in. I've got most of the engine portion wired on it. I've got to change my map sensor because the one I had was set up for an LS1 style map, whereas now I have the wiring for a Vortec and I don't feel like buying the adapter. I'm also wiring my fan relays, working on my control center, and I'm going to be wiring some gauges today. So I have an oil pressure gauge because these don't have an oil pressure feed to the ECM, so I'm not going to be able to see that on a live display. And I am wiring a wideband and my voltage gauge just to have it. For gauges and live feeds, I will buy a CTS3. They're a few $100s, but they seem to work pretty well, and they have the option to do tuning and stuff on them too, which I don't know if I'll try to use that, but for gauges, they will work. For full-time gauges, I have an AEM wideband, and then I have a couple gauges from Advance or AutoZone, whatever, that'll just work, and they're simple, but I'm going to try to do and clean up the wiring and try to make it look nice. Okay, so I consolidated my hots and grounds with shrink tube using the twist method, which isn't recommended. Then kind of lock the wires together with pieces of Tessa tape every 6 inches or so. And now I'm going to go over it with a woven loom and seal it up with some more shrink tube. So here's my wiring finished out. This is also how I build my standalone harnesses. I prefer the closed woven loom versus the split loom and versus the corrugated plastic. I think this just looks a lot better. So here's my cleaner section of wiring. So this is for the engine, this is key on power on for the car, and then my constant 12-volt junction is on the bottom side of this. I have a lot of wiring to clean up, but I did finish my gauges and they come on, so that's always good. And now I've got to try to figure out a place to mount this big bulky motherfucker. But I am done for the day. All this is just kind of dragging out for me now because I'm having to redo stuff that I already did because the Phytech didn't fucking work. But it is what it is. You just keep doing it and eventually it'll be done. I do also need to grab a starter so that I can put that on there because I'm pretty sure mine took a shit. Belt, we have fluids. I replaced an injector today because it stuck open and hydrolocked the engine. That was what I worked on today. So now I'm going to start it up, and it's probably still going to sound like shit. I know there's still a miss somewhere. It's just got to sort out where it's at, but it does start running idle on its own. Still have to make a tune for it also, and that'll probably help somewhat, but it runs. I'm happy. So for the record, the video sounds worse than it actually sounds in person just because it is open headers right now and it is pretty fucking loud.